Welcome everybody to this another policy hack session, and this is on National Policy and Software Product, which is freshly announced on 28th February by Government of India. And we have been working on this for a long time. I must thank the Ministry of Electronics and IT and everybody involved, especially Mr. Nakul, who is with us in this policy hack session today. And probably he can give us a lot of highlights over there of what the department thinks about it in terms of the vision that we carry. So after that, we'll be discussing what lies in the policy document and probably what more can be leveraged from the policy document. So, Mr. AK Garg, I would request you to please, give us an overview of the policy and the vision and mission of this policy.
Good morning, all. First, thank you for making me part of this. This is a learners group, and I am a pure bureaucrat working in the government. So I know I am an outsider, but let me, whatever little I can contribute, I'll try to contribute. So, first of all, let's understand the context. Where do we stand today? We are primarily a services economy, but we have done some great work in the past 4-5 years where we have an opportunity in the product space. Those folks, what I think is a two-mark difference that has happened in India in the last 4-5 years is one, is that we have actually built a large number of platforms, and thanks to iSPIRT being a very important partner in those, whether it's Aadhaar, whether it's UPI, whether it's a DigiLocker and all these are important platforms that become a hub of large data repository. And because the future products are to be built around data, so they are important things in which the Indian ecosystem should leverage that data. The second is the maturing of the startup space or the innovation space in India. We started with the journey of primarily a B2C startups with low innovation, low IP. But of late, what I have seen, because I am also a part of the startup and innovation activities in the ministry, so it has really matured into the tech space, and there we have an opportunity. So the product policy which the government or the cabinet approved, and which we work very closely with the industry, including iSPIRT for the last 4 years, is a very important step forward in the sense that it doesn't change the ecosystem, but it gives a holistic look to it. It gives a single window opportunity in which we can focus around few things, and where the government can pitch in to actually accelerate the process of India graduating into a product hub. Other important things is that what we look at is that first, there has to be a concentrated look at the issues that are involved in the product space, whether issues involved with small payment system, small IPOs, issues involved with having a dedicated HSN code. So there is some sort of a classification or categorization of products, and they can be handled and acted upon in a very concentrated way. The issue of relating to create a talent pool, which is a very important factor for the product space. So what we have done is that we have actually put in a lot of effort in building a talent pool, and that is a 3-tier effort. The first effort is primarily apprising our students at the school level that there is a difference between product development and services. The second important thing is creating a pool of developers. That is a prerequisite that we have found traveling around in India and abroad. That unless and until you have a large, dedicated, talented manpower dedicated to development of products and not actually calling themselves IT professionals or computer scientists, but primarily doing some sort of services related programming. The third is developing a pool of people who can be mentors to this new talent, identifying opportunities that lie in the product space, and India leveraging the opportunities around it. So this, what we have looked at is creating a talent of around a lakh, 10 lakh, and 10,000. All are ones, the number of zeros differ. So the second important thing that we have looked at in the policy is that how do we actually provide a dedicated market to our product space. And we have actually had there are a lot of elements that actually go towards it, because unless and until there is a dedicated market access and an early market access, we have realized that opportunities cannot be leveraged and we cannot offset the lot of challenges that come from proprietary products from outside. The third important thing is on the technology side, whether it's related to open APIs, providing sandboxes, looking at data. We are closely working with the Data Protection Act also, and seeing how the Data Protection Act or the future data protection regime protects the product space. So these are some of the very quick things. We have posted the policy on our website, and I, Nakul, and Sudhir have been working on, Sharad have been working on it for so long that we can keep talking about it. But I know it's better, most of you must have read it and you are better experts on the subject than us. So let me leave it to Sudhir and Nakul to take this forward.
Yeah, thank you, Gatsab. This is, I think, you really provided of this thinking that you are doing at the ministry for the product industry. So I think I'll just sum up for everybody's, benefit, the little bit of vision and mission, and then maybe go to strategy point and talk from there. So I think the vision both of the document is basically to make India a product nation. That is actually the mission. And then there are numbers in the mission statement, 10,000 technology startups, out of which 1,000 will be in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and upskilling professionals and cluster-based.
What the important things, let me interrupt a little on this. What is important is that we have not looked at in the product policies that we graduate our services industry into product industry. But we are looking at a completely new set of ecosystem that will be created in this country around the product space. That is one thing very important that has been the hallmark of this policy. Thank you.
I think thank you for that note. I think that's very, very important. And I believe that, after a long time, we are having a new policy, and that should be the hallmark of the policy, that we are starting afresh. And probably I will discuss more when we number 5, how, that affects. But in terms of strategy, I think the point number 1 is very, very important, which is an area closer to my heart, is making business easy for, any businesses, right from startups to existing product companies. And that probably is covering many areas. I think, and important of them are 3-4 points over there. I'll touch up and then let others speak on that. So the first one is basically creating an industry ownership, the Indian software product industry registry. So I think this is very, very important, because anything that we have to do further, I think software product registry becomes very, very important, even in creating tax incentives or creating any further plans in the government programs, schemes, etc. For example, if we have a formidable SaaS industry today. So if we have a registry of SaaS product industries, we could probably carve out very quickly we can carve out a scheme for them. So that's one very important area. When we have this registry in place, probably that will help us a lot. And then conducive environment is in general, but probably as Garg Saab is saying, this is fresh, not coming from the services industry. So that conducive environment when policy and
Actually, it got diluted because with your efforts, iSPIRT, a lot of things have been resolved in the last 4 years. When we started, there was a lot of things that were on the ask. But with time, right now, many things have been resolved, but we don't know what is there in future. And we have a national product mission, which will take care on a proactive basis.
Yeah, but I think we still have a lot of list for separate. And there'll be. So the third thing is the HS code, and a lot of detail cannot be given here, but I think that will unfold many things, especially from the fresh point of view, because everything gets mixed with the service industry because of the HS code today. And the last one is the R&D incentives, which is mentioned here. So these important points in this strategy area, I think I would let others come in, to speak on this strategy point.
Yeah, this is Amit, and just wanted to add a slightly broader view on this particular issue. And I come from the startup space, and then I've been working in the government. And one of the things you learn in startup is that what cannot be measured cannot be improved, right? And going further on that line is that what cannot be defined cannot be measured. So in many ways, what is happening with the software policy is that the government is taking a proactive view in terms of first defining what products are. And then, a logical breakdown of that is kind of, building the registry, building the classification system, building the codification system, so that at least the system lays down and recognizes the different dimensions, the different players in the industry, and thereby, once you have a clear understanding of it, then you can actually maybe tailor policies, or you can do specific things for specific parts of that product ecosystem. So I think this registry, the classification system, will kind of definitely help in mapping out the industry and making people aware about it, and thereon, there are many directional things that could emerge out of this classification system.
Just to add to what Amit just mentioned, I think that's the question which was in my mind too, Amit. But just as a clarification, it would be useful to not limit it from a startup view, because I think from a product, there has been an endeavor for a long time now for companies who are wanting to service the Indian market, like a company that I've been.
Probably comes back. I just also wanted to say what all of you have just said, that I think what is important with the policy is that when iSPIRT was formed, this was one of the moving objectives with which it was formed, to create a special focus area within the government on software products. And thanks to the major interventions of the government through Mr. AK Garg, the secretary, and the minister, we finally got this out. And in the policy, if you see, what you talked about, the HSN code and distinguishing that with services along with R&D, I think another most important point, which I think will be very beneficial for a lot of these software product companies, would be that they would get preferential inclusion in government procurement. And that has, I think, been a key point with a lot of the software product companies, that they are not able to apply for government contracts, because typically government contracts are structured towards the services sector. And with this particular important point where there'll be a preferred inclusion in government buying, I think that is a very, very important point which a lot of these software product companies should be looking for. And obviously focusing on software product policy products being products being allocated along with a lot of the international agreements which we have, that the government of India gives money to a lot of the developing countries, and being included, and that can be offset vis-a-vis the usage of the software products. I think these 2 points, along with what everybody else has said, will really help and galvanize and give a market to the Indian software product ecosystem.
So I think we lost you a little bit in between. You could complete,
Yeah, so my question is the definition clear?
Definition of?
Because that's the simple question. I mean, I'll give a long and short, because there seemed to be an assumption, and we had spent a lot of time on the definition back and forth, so that there isn't a dilution on the policy. It's as simple as.
So Shoaib, what they've done on the definition of an Indian software product company, and Sudhir and Ajay, please correct me if I've missed anything, is that the company needs to be 51% owned by Indian origin founders, citizens of India, and the IP must reside with the company in India.
Yeah, that's defined in the policy. So right now, that's how it will be taken. I think it is more or less clear to him. I think I know we spent a lot of time going back and forth, and this was a big point which was being taken up by.
So it is important point is that a lot of thinking has gone behind these two definitions: software product company and a software product as such.
Okay.
The first and foremost is that it's a very dynamic system or world as far as software product is concerned. What is today a product might not exist tomorrow, and what tomorrow will be a product we might not even have imagined today. So the thin line between a SaaS to be a services or a product always is there.
Right.
So you cannot give a definition that, and when a policy is coming, it is coming from the cabinet, so it's very difficult to modify it with changing paradigm of the industry. So what we have kept is a loose definition of a software product. Let me be very clear about it.
Okay.
And we have given a lot of chance for the policy space to actually evolve this definition with the growing industry. That is what we have an attempt on that has been made. Previously, we all thought together, we had long discussions on this with Sudhir and Nakul also. And previously, we thought that we'll never keep a definition as such. But ultimately, we had to with call pressures from the various stakeholders.
Right. Appreciate. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I think the definition is quite open, as you were saying. Okay. So should we go ahead to the next area, which is innovation and employment? Nakul, would you like to take up?
Okay, so I'll talk about innovation, and probably I'll request Ajay to come in terms of talking on the employment and skill development. What an important feature of the policy is also that the government and MIT would be putting together 20 grant challenges to solve for specific ecosystem problems in education, healthcare, agriculture. In fact, yesterday only, I was talking to Mr. Garg, and some ideas around having an Indian OS for mobiles was one of the probable challenge could be based on, where the government would give out some money and run a mini challenge grant, enabling people to innovate and build for specific needs, number one. Number two, Mr. Garg also said that yesterday maybe the hardware industry can also be pulled in to ensure that the uptake of that software is available. And I think that will be a very important driver in terms of driving new things. One, as I said, OS. The other could be linguistics, designing software to enable uh, conversations in all the languages of the country. And these are some of the overall possible challenges. But what is interesting is 20 grand challenges to be run. And already yesterday, in fact, the secretary has told me and Ajay that we need to flesh this out and start launching these challenges at the earliest.
What I will propose is that whatever are the strategies, we need to bring out schemes and programs. So, what I will request you and Sudhir is that can this forum be a forum from where we can crowdsource ideas? And we
Yes,
can have this as and when we are formulating, so we can actually share with them and then crowdsource the ideas to find to actually fine tune those. Is it possible?
Yes, yes.
yes, definitely. I think that'd be a very good idea if we can first put a basic list around it and of possible ideas, and then we share it with the ecosystem and let people then give their ideas. And you being there for another policy hack along with Sudhir, then we can distill them into a small bunch of 8, 10, or 15 uh, probable grand challenges, and then take them forward.
Continue now.
So also, Ajay, it'll be great if you can also talk about and share your thoughts on the skilling side and the various training programs which you've been thinking about having in the policy.
There are a few things. There are a lot of things that are happening around the skill space in the country. There is a future skill platform that NASCOM has come up with. Uh, uh, there is a a program called Prime that government of India is trying to launch on the skills, and that is primarily to actually upskill our professionals from the services to the new tech space. So that is one thing that is happening on the skill side. But let me be very frank about it, that this does not create a product ecosystem. The product ecosystem has to be people who think product and live with it. And they are actually not graduating from services to product, but they are up thinking in a very, very new way of how things can be done to a product space. So that is one idea. This is for normal talent pool that will be developed for the student. There will be a talent accelerator program for the school level students, which we will bring the dimensions of which I will share in some. Give me some more time. But about 10,000 to 15,000 hardcore software product professionals aware of the complete ecosystem are able to conceive new product ideas, or so that they can either mentor the new age companies or they can create those new age companies, is one program that we have to actually think through, that how do we actually bring that, and that will be the most important dimension for creating a product ecosystem, because you need someone to start an idea and then the programmers come in.
I think that's a wonderful thought and very important point. Because the point which you're saying is beyond the technology. It's to do with the entrepreneur being able to think through product and being skilled to do that, which comes from a combination of an ability to understand markets. So the product market piece is one part of the development of skills, which is important. The second piece which you touched upon is when you're saying creating an ecosystem for any product to sustain itself.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something on this point. I think, the way to think about it is that we have to catch people when they are young. And I've actually seen this play out that, a lot of times when students are in their secondary education, when they are doing their class 10th or their class 12th, if you kind of are able to impart education to them, if you are able to inform them, then it kind of takes a very early root in their minds, in their psyches. And anyway, product system is all about being experimental. It's all about, people trying out different things, failing, then retrying, and then, kind of slowly improving via every attempt. So I would say that, even at the secondary level, there should be some kind of a way to get this into people's, class 10th or class 12th education system, at least expose them to what is a product, how is it different from a services. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of product success stories from India. So we'll have to kind of, point out students that, this is what we mean by a product. And then uh, the expectancy is that, students themselves will also start kind of picking up and building on these things. If we leave it to, as Garg said, is skill building actually comes in at a secondary stage when you've actually completed your education and you've gone into industry, and then you're trying to tell them what is the difference between services and products. I think it actually happen while they are in schools and colleges.
Absolutely.
So if you can
One
complete
of the important things also in this is that, Amit, is that we do not have to replicate a Silicon Valley model, and that will never work.
Correct.
We have to think an India-specific solution that works, leveraging on the open API network and and a large data pool to create solutions that actually creates a India-specific ecosystems and not replicating the Silicon Valley model that most of the people actually think is the right model to go.
So I think we lost you in between a little bit again. So you can come in again. Please, we want to hear you.
No, I was just agreeing with Mr. Garg and Amit that look, you've got to create an India ecosystem. There are a few success stories which we have in India, which need to be understood. I'm not saying that they need to be copied. There need to be something relevant from the future. We have to participate. And
Okay, so I think we lost him again. Little bit of intermittent network. So Garg Saab, I think I agree with you, and Shoaib is also agreeing, and I also agree with you on the India-specific model, not copying Silicon Valley, but learning from Silicon Valley. I know that most of the models which are developed outside India fail in India. We have structurally, my belief, I won't go in detail, is that we have structurally different from grounds up. So they may fail. So we need to learn from Silicon Valley, but definitely not copy everything from there. I would understand. Just to bring in, there are two other points in the strategy, second strategy. One of them is about the cyber vulnerability, and I don't know whether Garg Saab can, elaborate on that. That is upgrading the infrastructure and create a support system for startups and software product designers to identify and plug cyber vulnerability. That's one important point, which should be interesting for startups. How they can work. And then there is a center of excellence. I think that goes with what we were speaking about right now. Because you need to create an environment and ecosystem where the product thinking is there, but then you graduate to a higher level from there. So these are other two areas which are mentioned in the policy, would probably be very interesting to note.
So, could you,
Gulsang, any comments on the how? What are the thoughts in Mighty on the cyber?
there are two or three things. Cyber, the first market is the government. It's so basically government cyber security. The first market in many a times happens to be government because those are the most secure systems that needs to be thought on. So you creating a market for startups, for Indian startups around cyber products is the first important step. There has been a specific window that has been opened on the GEM for this, where the various cybersecurity agencies can look at. But I'm sorry to say, that day DSCI came out and said that we have 170 cyber security product startups in the country. But there is not a single product that is registered there at the GIL. So first of all, what we need to actually work together is to create a single repository of various Indian cyber products and create a specific market for them in the government and outside the government. That's the first important step. The second step is actually understanding Indian cyber problem and throwing around challenge rounds, and that challenge rounds is actually part of the cyber policy also. So, and developing those solutions on a crowdsourcing. So these are two thoughts. There is a lot of thinking that was going on. There was a meeting day before yesterday also in the government to actually with the industry to see how do we create a small cybersecurity products ecosystem in India.
Okay, thank you. I think for that's very important to understand what's going on. So, can we move on to the next area about the domestic market, which is, I think, very, very important, and a lot of people would be interested in that. So, Nakul, can you start on there, and maybe Garg Saab can add a lot of value on that area?
Sure. Thanks, Sudhir. Now, what has also happened is, like I said, also that for Indian product companies to actually start scaling and start growing, it is very important for them to get some anchor customers. And I think in the policy, Mr. Garg and my team has kept this into consideration, where their allocation towards product procurement, preferential allocation in product procurement, will play a very important role for those product companies to get one anchor customer or two anchor customers, and then go out and start competing with companies in India and the rest of the world as well. I think that is a very important thing which the product companies in India should look for, and will open up a new huge market for them. But at the same time, I think it's very important the product entrepreneurs need to consider is that the time horizons, typically in a government RFP, one needs to be aware of those and cognizant of the animal which you're dealing with, which is the government RFP. And however, that said, it does open massive new markets for them.
So, Nakul, in that I'll come out with it. There are two primarily, I agree with you, first one or two anchor markets or opportunities actually make or break a company.
Yeah.
And that's one ecosystem that we have to think of. In that, there are two players, the government and the private sector. And we have to think through both of them. For a government, what is there? There is an initiation. There is a thing called a government e-marketplace. We are closely working with GEM to actually create a specific window for Indian software products. But where I will need your advice and your support is that how to think about few things. First, how do we actually, most of the product companies do not have the capacity to actually deliver at the scales many of the requirements are there. So they need to actually systematically tie up with SIs. And how do we system integrators, and how do we do that so that their interest is not compromised by the SI? That is one thing that we have to look at. The second thing is awareness building in various government agencies that a new niche product can add value to their functioning and to their productivity.
Yes.
That is, and so a young entrepreneur or a product developer might not get an opportunity to reach out to the right stakeholder. But how do we make them reach to the right stakeholder? That is important, and that we need to think through. As far as the private sector is concerned, getting a first private market, which is very important for the success of the startup, I went to Bangalore the last 15 days back. Everyone was talking about that. So, a market access, there is no dearth of funds in the country or other things that people were saying, but we need a first market. And what is a solution to getting a first market and what role government can play in that? I'll be very happy to get your views on that so we can create something constructive around that.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think on this point,
Sure. I think all of us over here will be more than happy to give you some suggestions around that. Sorry, Amit, go ahead.
yeah. So, actually, this is a pretty important point, which is the development of the domestic market, and especially in the context of software as a service. We've seen this trend in India where, especially amongst SaaS companies, there is kind of an unwritten rule that the Indian domestic market is kind of, not big enough or doesn't pay enough to sustain many of the SaaS startups. So what you'll see, many VCs are very actively, advising their startups that, if you're a SaaS company, you can build a SaaS company out of India. But, that's essentially, the engineering and the product and the design and all that. But the market itself, you'll have to kind of, go overseas, go to America and go to Europe and go to other parts of Asia. So that's kind of a little bit of a disturbing trend. You see that with lots and lots of startups. So I think the development of the Indian domestic market, I think, is extremely important. One of the factors where which will play a role there is kind of graduating these startups up the quality ladder as well. Because if for a buyer of a particular piece of technology, the buyer frankly looks at the best product in the market at the best price. They are less. I mean, they might think of, let me buy from an Indian company, but if there's a better product from an overseas company, frankly, you can't fault the buyer just to why should they buy from an Indian company. So Indian companies, Indian product startups have to graduate up the quality ladder. They have to build at a better quality and then be able to compete with these companies, because it is very important to break this negative feeling in the ecosystem that if you're SaaS, you cannot sell in India. You got to go out.
I agree with Amit, and definitely there is. We see there are a lot of competing products existing, but there are frictions in the market, and these SaaS companies are not able to penetrate the market, and there are cultural issues. Where probably Shoaib can give a lot of insight over there, because he has closely worked with the domestic market and what challenges exist. Shoaib, can you on this?
I was just going to say that Shoaib should have very good experience about how do you build a product company which is catering to the domestic market.
So I think so my point is that quality software and create which allows customers to be able to buy and service is a critical piece. A software ecosystem of people who sell software, integrate software, manage software is a completely different ecosystem altogether. And making sure that the policies support that, recognize it, is the first step. And I think we've started with that, and I'm happy to spend more time to maybe on a separate section take up what does it take to do this on a basis, leverage what is happening in the market and things like that.
Okay, I think that will be
it's important. Other important thing is that we have to think around what Shoaib said, that the quality is a very important factor. But even if you have quality and you don't have a brand, that actually is a lot big challenge. So we have to think around that. We have to create a collective brand somehow, somewhere, so that all these quality software products can actually leverage that brand to sell their products in the government or outside the government.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. There is a huge lacuna there, because it's not just being functional, but creating the brand as distinctive value and which can get well accepted is a challenge in front of us.
Okay, great. So just for the benefit of people who would be viewing this blog and reading this blog further, The fourth strategy point on the domestic market again mentions creation of a registry and integrating with the GEM, which is very, very important. And I think that's where it starts. If you have a product registry and a SaaS product registry, it is actually going to create access to all these markets. For example, GEM is one big source for a lot of small players. And as Shoaib said, we can have other special sessions on, especially on the domestic market or the market access front, how we will leverage the policy further. And as we develop programs and scheme, we can have a separate session further on this. So let's move ahead. And maybe the last point that a very important point that we have here is the implementation mechanism. And I think I don't know whether we can take credit as iSPIRT. We had proposed this, and National Software Product Mission, was proposed by iSPIRT into the policy. And so I had, from my background in STPI and in government working earlier, when I was early in the STPI, I was on many committees, and the reason was that I was the quickest one to understand many of those issues lying between policy and technology. So a lot of government officers took me on those committees. And, one of the big things that we could do, apart from those list of incentives, was actually providing an umbrella cover to the export industry. And issues that used to come up were nowhere listed in the scheme, nowhere listed in any of the regulations. And industry used to come up with those issues just because there was a special vehicle organization working over that industry. We could intervene and get those solved. So coming from that experience, the National Software Product Mission will be very, very important, because this will become a nodal agency which will actually focus at the center of the activity, which is Ministry of IT, and it will have wherewithal to influence people at right places, maneuver and navigate through the system and get things resolved. So I think this will be NPS, the product mission will be a very, very important part of this policy, and anything that happens in future will be through this mission. Possibly any policy can actually further create multiple programs and multiple schemes. For example, I immediately have an idea of implementing a scheme, design and immediately implement a scheme for SaaS industry. Garg Saab may not agree with me, but the tax regimes understand only the difference between goods and services. Now, there is something which is product which lies in between. Even you can create productized services. So SaaS, according to us, and we have blogs and detailed discussions on this, is a product, right, before it actually becomes a service. So we could actually create a scheme for SaaS industry, which is a formidable industry in India, and you can actually create a lot of benefits for them. And as Amit was saying, they can hope for an Indian adoption inside India. Right, so that is where we can. I am working in this area for some time now with SMEs, and I see the challenges and the problems. And one of the challenges is that people don't know at all about it, and it is not listed anywhere. Right? There is no understanding. So probably if we make a registry of SaaS industry and connect it with GEM, and then create a program of education, maybe issue an advisory to all the state governments from central government, from MIT. And then, you can actually immediately create a traction around SaaS. So, to introduce the fifth strategy point, this is what I had to say. Others can come in and jump in. Maybe Gautam say something on this.
Absolutely agree. Why will I not disagree with? Why will I? I know SaaS is a very important thing. SaaS brings down the cost of software for many users. Agreeable, it will reduce the cost of the government on using IT for their internal purposes. But one of the very important things is that we have to educate the people. Secondly, we have to actually educate the people on the procurement models.
Yes.
Because most of the time, the procurement models are one-time purchase. Whereas in a SaaS, you have to put in budgets every year or every quarter and some things like that, or every month. Or it will be pay per use also, which is very difficult proposition in the government to get approved. So how do we actually face all these challenges that we have to look at? The second important, exactly what you said, that you have to educate. That's a very important thing. We should develop a program that actually educates people. Let's have a brainstorm around this somewhere in April, that how do we go forward on this subject. It's a very crucial thing and a very huge market opportunity.
Yeah, in terms of the implementation game plan, I think one of the factors that comes to my mind is that people aspiring to be product entrepreneurs or to build product startups, the entry barriers have to be kind of made easier. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you consider, like, for example, in India, obviously, there's a big services industry. And what has happened in the last 7-8 years, especially in the startup space, is that there's a lot of activity around e-commerce, essentially around transactional businesses. And so much so that you can see that for people wanting to start a company, there is a choice that you can start either a services thing or you can start an e-commerce thing. And now the government is going to actively promote products, which means that there is an opportunity for this person to also kind of think of a product. But the reality also is that the e-commerce ecosystem is far more developed. It has lower gestation. It is think of the number of companies, e-commerce companies in India, which have a valuation of $1 billion, and you'll find many of them. There are dozens of them. Now think of 1 or 2 Indian companies which are product companies and which have a similar valuation, and you'll find that it'll be hard pressed to kind of think of the names. So essentially, there's going to be some kind of an internal competition as well. I noticed in the policy, for example, it talks about 1,000 crore allocation for product startups in the fund of funds. And I felt that that could probably be bigger, because if the overall allocation is about 10,000 crores, and if you're putting 1/10 of that into products, then it's still not a very big number. But overall, my broader point is that we have to look at ways that how do we make the entry barriers for building product companies lower for these entrepreneurs. It's very important. Otherwise, human nature is kind of to go via the path of the least resistance, right? And it is true that transactional businesses and e-commerce businesses do offer a lower resistance path to entrepreneurs. Products just take much longer to build. The gestations are much higher. The risks are much higher because you're taking the product risk, which e-commerce entrepreneur is not taking. So that's something that I feel is pretty important.
Thank you, Amit, for I think very important insight. Shoaib, can you come on this? Do you have any expectation, anything that you have on the product mission point and implementation further?
No, I think the challenges are to get the role models going. Very important to showcase this, and I agree that that's the key. Education is something that we've been talking about. Figuring out from 2 dimensions. One is the entrepreneur, and the second is also educating the Indian SMB customer or the Indian customer
as such.
I agree with you. I think that's very, very important. So Nakul, I'm sure you will be directly hooked up to Dr. Garg, and you would be the implementation will be closely seen. But any thoughts that you have at this point?
No, I think Sudhir, it's like now this is just the policy is just the first step. We still have miles to go, because now the implementation with what you also been working, Sudhir, typically on the HSN code and the taxation parity will play huge role. And I feel that these are some small low-hanging fruits which can be done in the next 1 to 2 to 3 months, where HSN code or registry, all that can be set up as well. So I think many more miles to go, and all the implementation. In fact, yesterday there was a conversation happening that we need to start implementing this within 2 months. The first 2-3 things in terms of registry, the HSN code. So I think it'll only get more hectic, and I would want the product ecosystem, people who can spare some time as volunteers to help with the subgroups which Sudhir and I will create, typically around the aspects of the policy, so that we can go back to the government and offer Mr. Garg possible solutions and possible architectures of implementation thing which need to be done.
So that's a very gentle push to Dr. Garg. Anyway, ball do lie in his court, but I think we all have to put in.
So, Sudhir, I have not met you for long. Can it possible to come over sometime next week? We need to talk on the HSN code, because that's a very important factor of this policy. And I know you know this, because what I have thought through is that the International Customs Union has to come into it, and that will take years. But first of all, can we create a domestic HSN code systems around products, which does not have a huge regulatory role, but it will actually create the first insight that how does it add value?
Yeah, certainly I can come anytime. That's not a problem. But I think we will have to quickly involve DGFT, and there is a committee on HSN with Ministry of Finance and all those people. But we can put a paper, and that's where the product mission is important, because once there is an authority with somebody, they can actually push. Now, there is an authority because policy is there. So probably there is, there is some kind of a legitimacy to this action now, and we can push this action further, definitely. And we will definitely be, coming on many of those things, and probably we will think of if we can quickly launch some kind of a scheme or something. But I think, according to me, the biggest challenge for MIT or the biggest task that lies here is the quick and early formation of the national product mission.
We'll do that.
And then we can start pushing things. In the meantime, we can start working on whatever thoughts we have. Nakul can contribute. Shoaib can come in many ways. Amit is there in Delhi. We can contribute, and then we will have other volunteers to come in. I think that's a role that we have to play. So, is there any other thing that anybody wants to comment on? The final comments?
Maybe all of us can go one on the final comments, starting with probably with Ajay ji, and then all of us can give one last comment before we this thing.
So let me first thank you all for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts on this subject. I know that it will be a difficult journey. It has been a difficult journey. It will be a difficult journey. Adhering to timelines is one thing that we always in the government are good at, slippages. So but one thing is important, that I am a professional first and a government person. So I always believe that good ideas have an opportunity to be implemented somehow. So let's all think through and see how can we build Indian ecosystem. If we are looking at data, how do we have our own social media platforms to actually use it and create an ecosystem? If we are talking about a huge fintech industry, how do we actually take it grow it in India and take it abroad? So these are some of the few points that we have to think through, and we have to all work together to make this happen. Thank you.
Shoaib, can you come in?
Yes, thank you. I think this is a wonderful. Count me in as your volunteer and support today, Nakul. Happy to support.
Thanks.
Amit?
Yeah, so, in the media, very frequently you see these articles and lists being published about the top innovative countries in the world, or the top brands across the world. And we all see those lists, and it always hurts us that there are rarely, or if any, Indian names in those lists. At least to me, at least this is something which is very dear to me. The fact that we cannot actually point towards even a handful of brands and say that these brands are actually the best in the world, they are world class, the entire world uses it. So I think the dream is that at some point in time you're going to have Indian companies create products that are going to be world class, they're going to be world beaters. And I think that this policy is kind of a very, it could have come in maybe 20 years ago, but anyway, there's always time to start. And now let's hope that this policy will kind of become the catalyst, it will become the crystallizing influence for the product industry to come together in India. And maybe in a few years we will actually have Indian companies and Indian brands in those global lists. So that'll be something that I'll be looking forward to.
Thank
So
you.
let me, before we go, sorry, I'll again take 2 more minutes of yours. We have started few things where I'll need your support. What we have done is we have started a tied incubation and development of entrepreneurs, technology incubation, where we are using technology for sectorial challenges, setting up 51 incubators around the country, mainly around uh, uh, institutes of higher learning and research. The second, in that we are also creating some sort of an accelerator inside Mighty called the Mighty Startup Hub. So in that, what we are looking is interconnecting the ecosystem that we have around the startup ecosystem and providing them a single window to actually channel them to the right source. The third important thing is that we have started or initiated 10, around 10 are there and 16 are in pipeline. Center of excellences around sectoral center of excellences at different places in the country. So these are some of the few things. What I will do is I'll share all these initiatives with Nakul, who can share it with your community. What I need is 2 things. I need your support in actually making them happen on the ground. I need you as a pool of mentors who can actually support these startups. I need your ideas around that. How do you build this software development fund of 1,000 crore with 4,000 crore infusion from the industry? How do we actually make it work? And it is actually available to the companies, not a hindrance to the companies. So these are some of the few things I will share with you on the blog or some through Nakul. And let us all work together to create a very strong technology sector in the country.
Yes.
I think that's very, very important. And we will definitely cooperate with you wherever, and we are ready to further. Yeah, Nakul.
I just want to make a statement. When I joined iSPIRT in 2013, I had met up with Shoaib at that time and trying to get SMEs on the SME ministry online. In 2014, when the new government came in, when Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad came down to Bangalore and promised us that yes, there will be a software product policy. It is good to see that he's kept his word and we've had this policy. But I think I just want to name out 4-5 people who were the from where the concept about the product policy came out. And I like to thank them, because if they had not thought of this at that time, I don't think we would have had this version today. And those people include Mr. Bharat Goenka, Shoaib himself, Mr. Vishnu Dusad, Mr. Naveen Tiwari, who were, and Mr. Rishikesh Krishnan, who were probably the architects of the first draft of the product policy. And obviously, Sudhir, you've been a massive help working. Been really a pleasure working with you on this. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Nakul. So I will wrap it up and close with my thanks to Dr. Garg. Special thanks of coming in.
Yeah, thank you. And it was a pleasure hearing you all.
And I think this is a great idea. as Dr. Garg was saying, he wants to share many things with us. Probably, Dr. Garg, if you and other people in Mighty can come in on such policy hack sessions on different topics,
Perfect.
that will be very educative for the people. And because these are just discussions, we are a think tank, so we're just thinking with you. It is nothing. It is not. We are not.
I understand.
And therefore, it will be very useful for the community and the industry overall. So thank you all. Thank you, Shoaib. Thank you, Amit, for joining in and for your insights. Karthik, thank you for all that backend support. Thanks, Nakul. So we'll wrap it up now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.